In a small, quiet town surrounded by dense forests, there lived a young girl named Lily. Everyone knew her for her bright smile and contagious laugh. One day, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Lily went out to play near the woods and never returned. The town was engulfed in fear and sadness. People searched everywhere, calling out her name, but she was nowhere to be found. Days turned into weeks, and the hope of finding Lily started to fade. The townsfolk whispered tales of the forest, speaking of shadows and secrets hidden in its depths. They said it was a place from which few returned. Then, on a cold, misty evening, a group of hikers decided to explore a cave near the edge of the woods, a place untouched and feared by the locals. As they ventured deeper, their lights flickered upon a sight that made their hearts stop. Lily, sitting in the far corner of the cave, her eyes dark and empty, her smile twisted in a way that was unnervingly unnatural. As they approached, Lily's laughter echoed off the walls, a sound so chilling it seemed to come from another world. Her eyes, once filled with warmth, now held a darkness that seemed to swallow the light. The drawings around her depicted scenes of the forest, but with a sinister twist. Trees with faces twisted in agony. Lily spoke, but her voice was different, laced with a coldness that made the air around her feel heavy. She told tales not of adventures, but of a darkness that had embraced her, of whispers that had filled her mind with shadows. The cave, she said, was her home now, a place where she belonged with the creatures that whispered in the dark. The hikers fled, their hearts pounding with fear, leaving Lily behind. Her laughter followed them, a haunting reminder of what lay hidden beneath the serene facade of the forest.
I witnessed something disturbing on an episode of Barney. While scrolling through a lost media forum, I noticed a comment talking about an episode of An Odd Cut in an episode of Barney. I just so happened to have a VHS collection from my childhood of each season, so I dug it out and started scanning through the episode until I got to the exact scene that the OP was talking about.
You can have an adventure in a faraway land. You can learn about it.
And just like that, we skipped to the next scene. The sight of this disturbed me, to such a point that I wanted to find out what happened. I tried contacting Mattel, the current owner of Barney, and they didn't respond. I took matters into my own hands and went to the location where they filmed that scene. It was a preschool that had been abandoned. When I searched through the records, I discovered that this place had been abandoned on the exact same in 1994. That's before this episode had released. Did something really happen on set that caused this?
Do you guys ever wonder why Halloween is in October and why this month is the peak season for horror? I honestly don't know. I mean, y'all have Google, so you can go and look it up. I'm sure there's an actual reason for it. But every time October rolls around, I think about the story that my grandma told me when I was little. This story is the reason that I cover my windows on the last night of the month. Keep in mind, I grew up in a country that didn't celebrate Halloween, but I do have a theory for why October is considered the scariest month of the year. Many years ago lived a family with 2 children, a boy named Jan and a girl named Sveta. They were roughly around the same age. The story says that they were inseparable. They had the best brother-sister relationship the world has ever seen. Unfortunately, late one July, the brother got sick and the sister was heartbroken. When the doctor came to check on Jan, the verdict wasn't promising. Jan had no more than 3 months left to live. The only thing the doctor could suggest was a specific medication only sold in the city. The family lived in a village that didn't have many resources and they couldn't afford this medicine, so the only thing they could do was pray for their son's recovery. However, as time went on, his condition worsened. They began to believe that their son's sickness was God's will and started planning for their child's death. Sveta refused to accept this. She could not let her brother die, so she started traveling to the city at night without her parents' permission to make extra cash. She found the most luck asking store owners for work. Many felt sympathy for her and her situation, so they would let her do simple tasks such as cleaning up their stores after closing, restocking, or organizing inventory. Even the local pharmacy owner let her work there at night, and luckily he and Sveta got along pretty well. He said that he would give her the medicine for a discounted price, which was perfect because in a span of a month, Sveta was able to make enough money to afford it and give it to her brother. But sadly, it just slowed down his decay. It was clear that his recovery wasn't in the stars. Sveta would spend every waking moment with her brother and fall asleep by his bed. On the good days, they would have great conversations filled with laughter, and seeing her brother smile made Sveta's life worth living. But sadly with time, Jan became less responsive and his smile faded away completely. He would spend his days staring at the ceiling with a blank expression on his face. Sveta couldn't bear this pain. Losing her brother's smile was the final straw. She snuck out to the city for the final night. She remembered seeing a book in one of the stores titled The Hidden Art of Restoration. After speaking to the owner of the store, he agreed to give her the book for one night. But he also confessed that he's never seen this book before and isn't sure how it got into the store in the first place. And that was the last recorded interaction of that night. The next morning, both her and her brother were found dead. Their bodies were laid out in the yard with bloody smiles painted across their faces. Their time of death was declared as October 31st at 4 a.m. The book was never found. The story diverges as to what exactly happened that night. Some say she tried to make a deal with the devil but couldn't hold up her end of the bargain. Some say she killed herself to trade her life for her brother's, but without success. Skeptics believe that she's gone mad and cut their veins to paint the smiles, but many events of that night are left unexplained. Both of the siblings were covered in excessive wounds, something a person couldn't physically do to themselves. Later, the parents found a smile painted on 2 windows of their house. Well, regardless of the details, it was clear that something was set free that night, because within a month of that incident, their village became a ghost town. The strangest thing was that no dead bodies were ever found. But urban explorers say that there's a red smile painted on at least one window of every house. It seemed as if the people were disappearing into thin air. The ones that tried to escape or move out of town mysteriously disappeared shortly after. It is said that the entity that was released that night returns on the same day every year, and once you see it, it will try to put a smile on your face. If you manage to escape, it will haunt you until it finds a moment to take you away, and no one knows what happens then. While this creature can only be seen by the human eye on the night of October 31st, it can follow a person for up to a month without being detected. The only chance of survival you have is to not look at it in the first place. It's been reported to be seen in windows and sometimes even mirrors. And if you see a red smile painted anywhere in your home, just know that it has chosen you.
This guy took a video of his neighbor's window and saw this. Why are there so many flies? Well, most likely there is a dead body in there. So I went in his other videos to look for an update. And then 3 days later, the flies are still there and there's no context. Did this guy call the police? Did he let anyone know? This is crazy.
This story sent chills down my spine. If you're a scary story lover like me, stop scrolling. Just wait until you hear the end. The story was sent to me by Gracie, who lives in a small town in Illinois. Back in 2020, she was living with her ex-boyfriend in Roadhouse. They lived in a 2-story older home, not really sure the year it was built, but it was like a really old home. They'd already been dating for over a year at this point, so she decided she was going to go ahead and move on in with him. One night she was in the downstairs bathroom washing up, getting ready for dinner, and all of a sudden she heard her 2 dogs start running from the kitchen to the living room. When she opened the door, her ex was sprinting upstairs, so she asked him, what happened? Was there a burglar, an intruder? What's going on? She said his face was just pale white. He said he was making dinner and he was alone in the room and it was super quiet. When suddenly he heard like a really dark, raspy old lady's voice scream "hey" directly in his ear. But when he turned around, no one was there. That same night, Gracie was sitting downstairs with her ex-boyfriend, and all of a sudden he jumps up and starts freaking out again. saying that same old lady's voice was just in his ear, and this time he felt a hand go up his arm and to his shoulder. Fast forward, Gracie's now living in Carlton, Illinois with the love of her life. His mother sadly passed away recently. They had moved her ashes into their room just to keep them safe. They had a 1-year-old and a dog, and they just didn't want them to get knocked over or anything. The day they moved her ashes into their room, freaky stuff started happening. That night, they were sitting in the front room watching a movie when they hear the TV start going off in Gracie's bedroom, which was weird because the Wi-Fi was being stupid and they couldn't get the TV to connect. Her boyfriend goes to check it out, and underneath of where the mother's ashes was sitting was the mother's favorite bottle of liquor. It was her favorite song that was playing on the TV. TV that wasn't connected to Wi-Fi, the one they couldn't get to work. They were obviously completely freaked out, but they didn't really pay any more attention to it until recently. I guess the other day her boyfriend was sitting in their front room and they have like this ledge in there that's 4 foot tall and like 12 foot wide. Gracie was laying down in her bedroom when she heard her boyfriend say from the front room, "I saw you, Grace." She was laying there thinking, you know what? Like, I'm laying in the bedroom. How do you see me from the front room? So she walks out and she's like, What are you talking about? Her boyfriend was like, "Come on, I just saw you duck down behind the ledge trying to scare me." Gracie said, "Absolutely not. I was in bed." Her boyfriend's face just dropped. They also hear footsteps sometimes, and sometimes they hear some weird noises. They've even heard each other talking when the other person wasn't talking, or even when the other person wasn't even home. Gracie wants to know what she might be dealing with. Do y'all think this is a mimic, or I don't know, do y'all have any other ideas? If so, drop them in the comments. I cannot wait to hear your thoughts on this one. And as always, if you have a scary story, send it to me on here or my email address, which is linked in my bio. Love y'all.
Every Christmas, children in my town go missing. This is part 2. If you missed part 1, go back and watch that. It was finally December and my dad told me that he had a surprise for me. From behind his back, he pulled out an advent calendar. Every year, my dad got me an advent calendar. But this year, he was worried he wasn't going to be able to find one. Most of the shops were selling out of them really quickly. Being the dad he was, he spent hours driving around town looking for one until he found one for me. And it was December 1st, which means I get to open one right now. I was excited to open it, but I couldn't help think about my friend Finn. He loved advent calendars too. I started to cry and my dad comforted me until I fell asleep. I had completely forgotten to open the first door of the advent calendar. When I fell asleep, I began to have nightmares. It was a horrific dream about him and the other kids that went missing. The first thing I looked at was the advent calendar with its cute little hand-drawn houses covered in snow, but almost immediately I noticed that something wasn't quite right about the advent calendar. The door to the first night was wide open. I hadn't opened it. I climbed out of bed to get a closer look at what was behind the door. I should have just stayed in bed because what I saw next was horrifying.
The story that I'm about to share is still a very active haunting, so I highly recommend you put on your AirPods and don't have this playing out in the open. And if this is the type of content that you're into, feel free to follow me. I post every single day. For the sake of the story, we're going to call her Myra. Myra has always had something follow her for as long as she could remember. It usually gets worse around the times where she's feeling down or is going through something. It especially got worse around the time that her best friend passed away. Every night, Myra will have the same dream of this thing showing up in her room with long black hair, pale skin, skinny, with wide eyes, and these really sharp, pointy teeth that made Myra believe that what she was looking at was not human. This thing never blinks or moves, but even when Myra is awake and on her day-to-day life, the minute she closes her eyes, she right away sees a vision of this thing. So it's almost like this thing follows her at all hours of the day. One night, things got especially worse when Myra woke up at about 2 a.m. and she felt like the air around her was heavy. She couldn't catch a breath, and it almost felt like something was squeezing her heart. She then noticed that her window was slightly open and her blinds were moving even though there was no breeze outside. She then starts to hear a slight tapping from outside of the window. Myra decides to ignore this and tries her hardest to go back to sleep when she then starts to hear that same tapping coming from her bedroom door. She then heard what sounded like her mom talking, asking her if she was okay and if she would come out here to talk. Just when Myra was about to open the door, she remembered that her mom was actually not even home. Like, she was out of town. Myra was completely home alone. Even though Myra's starting to get a little freaked out, she's trying to convince herself that maybe she's just hearing things because she's exhausted, and she decides to try to go back to sleep. The minute she closes her eyes, she starts to have this dream where she sees her friend who had just passed away sitting in a chair telling her that the woman that was there was not there to hurt her. Myra then responded that she had a really bad feeling about this woman and that she knew that she was. The minute she said this, her friend's face started to contour into the evil grin that the woman had, and it slowly turned into the woman. This is getting a little bit long, so I'm gonna have to do a part 2. We'll be up right after this one.
Grab it and put it in. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee.
You don't know the dark truth behind Peppa Pig. Hello, I'm Peppa, and this is my story. I was never a healthy child. My mom struggled with addictions that started before I was born, which gave me several birth defects. I was born with both eyes on one side of my face. I couldn't walk or do almost anything for myself. My dad hated me for it. He blamed me for him never being able to do anything in his life besides taking care of me. He hid me in the house and never let me leave. He thought it was only fair that I didn't get to have a life either. He became very mentally ill after being in the house with me for several years. One day he snapped and wanted to make me normal. He tried to make an eye hole for me on the correct side of my face. That night I passed, and he didn't tell anyone what happened. After 6 months of my brother Georgie and my mum asking what happened to me, he snapped again. He took himself and both of them to the afterlife with me.
Mom, what are you cooking? It smells so good.
Honey, what are you talking about?
You're cooking downstairs, aren't you?
Luna, lock your door right now.
Why?
Because I'm not cooking. I'm at work.
What? Then who's downstairs?
That's not important right now. I'm on my way home. If she tries talking to you, don't respond.
She's coming upstairs. I can hear her footsteps.
I'm 3 minutes away. Hold on. Oh, and by the way, if you hear any humming of some sort, I want you to cover your ears.
What? Why?
Just listen to me, Luna. This isn't the time.
Oh my God, she's banging on the door. Mom, she sounds exactly like you. But
Luna, don't listen to her. She's dangerous.
she just slid a note under the door. The corner of the paper is covered in blood, and there's some sort of inverted pentagram on the front.
Luna, let go of that paper. Luna, answer me.
Hey, Evelyn.
Where's Luna? I swear if you did anything to her...
Don't worry about her. If you answer this question correctly, she can live. What has 5 points, shaped like a star, and has a goat head in the middle?
Damn you.
Wrong answer.
You can now check part 2 by pressing share then more.
This is the scary story about the school trip. An entire class of 6th graders went on a school trip one day. Everybody was taking pictures with their phones and cameras and having such a great time. But when they all got back to school, they started looking through all the photos they took, when suddenly one of the girls screamed, "Oh my God, what is that?" In the picture, one of the boys in the class was sitting on the bus, and nothing seemed strange about the photo until you looked at his reflection in the window. His face in the reflection looked like it was yellow and bulging, and completely mutating. Also, there was a white floating figure behind him in the reflection. Everybody turned the photo upside down and realized it was a human skull, and it was horrific. And when the boy saw the photo of himself, he immediately burst into tears and had a panic attack. The teacher then took the boy to the nurse's office, and the principal banned everybody from speaking about the strange photo ever again. And to make this even scarier, 7 days later, the boy died from a brain tumor. The photo is said to be on the internet somewhere, but I don't recommend looking for it.
My neighbor told me not to turn out the light. If you see my last video, you know that I've been getting letters from my creepy neighbor. And we got another one, folks. We got another one. So one of the letters had rules on it. And one of the rules was on Wednesday night, leave the porch light on. Well, all my life we voted and you guys said I should risk my life and turn it off. So I did. But nothing happened. Or so I thought. Because this morning I woke up to a new letter. And we're about to open it together. I'm scared. Neighbor, I hope this letter finds you well. I must admit, I noticed your decision to leave the porch light off last night. While it saddens me to see that you chose to defy my request, I trust that you now understand the importance of adhering to the rules I've provided. I must remind you that these rules were not given lightly. They are not to be taken as mere suggestions, but rather they carry significant consequences if not followed diligently. The darkness may seem like a sanctuary, but it cannot shield you from what lurks behind its veil. I urge you to reconsider your actions and show proper respect for the instructions I've shared. Ignoring my advice will only lead to more unsettling circumstances, and I wouldn't want to see you suffer the consequences. In the spirit of neighborly harmony, I hope we can find mutual understanding. I will be watching you closely to see if you comply with my requests. But when I left the light off, nothing happened, so I don't know.
Me and my mother lived alone in a small bungalow in the centre of a very remote village, the kind of place where everybody knew everybody else's business and everybody seemed to be related somehow. On a random Wednesday afternoon in November, I was walking home from school alone. I can vividly remember kicking the crispy brown autumn leaves beneath my feet whilst watching frost rise from the concrete. As I got to the front door of our bungalow, I went to open the door. However, it was locked. My mother never locked the door, especially if she expected me back from school. I didn't have my own key as I was only 10 years old, and knowing me, I'd probably lose it. I kneeled down onto the patio and opened the letterbox with my freezing cold fingertips. Mum? Mummy? Let me in, please? I shouted. No response. I shouted again. Mum! Hurry up, it's freezing out here! No response. After several minutes of shouting for my mum, I slumped myself down on the patio with my back leaning against the front door. As I peered to my left, I noticed something. Aha! The plant pot. I knew my mother always kept a spare house key under the plant pot in case of emergencies like this. Well, not exactly like this, but I presume you get the picture. I tilted the plant pot ever so slightly, just enough so that my little hands could reach underneath and grab the key. I wiped the muddy key onto my school skirt and began to insert it into the door. After unlocking the door, I walked straight into the living room, presuming to find my mum asleep on the couch with a newspaper and a cup of cold tea by her side. However, she was not in there. I went through to her bedroom to see if she had taken a nap in her bed, but again, no sign of her. The bathroom door was wide open, so it was clear to me she was not in there either. Mum, can you stop hiding now? Why would you lock the door when you know I don't have a key?
I don't like this.
I shouted, but of course no response. I pottered through to the kitchen, dragging my rucksack and my lunchbox behind me. No. There she was. I threw all my belongings onto the floor and ran straight over to her. Mum, wake up. Mum, I'm home now. I had a really good day at school. Mr. Wilson gave me a sticker for completing my homework. Mum, come on, wake up. No response. I went to hold her hand. She was cold and motionless. As soon as I touched her, I knew she was dead. Her face was grey and emotionless.
Oh my god.
I gathered myself together and pottered around the kitchen trying to find something that could have caused my mother's sudden death. There were 2 used bowls on the worktop. 2 bowls. This means that my mother was not alone today. This means that my mother had a visitor. There was an empty can of vegetable soup next to the hob. Perhaps this is what my mother and her visitor had had for dinner? My mother didn't have allergies. My mum didn't have any health conditions. How could a bowl of soup possibly kill my perfectly healthy mother? Sooner or later, my neighbour arrived and she called 999. I was then taken to my grandmother's house by the police, where I started my new life. I never found out what happened to my mother. I always tried to put it to the back of my mind, as I was so young, and I just knew that the trauma would eat my insides and I would never be able to think straightly again. My grandmother never mentioned my mum. I think she tried to forget about it, as they both didn't have the best relationship. Fast forward 17 years and I now have my own house and my own family. Me and my husband have a daughter who's 3 years old. We were trying to get pregnant for a while, and after a few miscarriages, our miracle baby finally joined us.
Oh.
Elsie May.
Oh, that's cute.
Around 3 weeks ago, something very strange happened. Something completely out of the ordinary. Me and my husband had been working all day and could not be bothered to cook. I was rooting around in the cupboards, trying to find something quick and easy that I could slap together for dinner.
What's a vegetable soup?
We had a few tins of soup knocking about in the cupboard, so I got them out and began to heat them up on our hob. I called my husband into the kitchen so that he could butter some bread to have with our dinner, because of course you cannot eat soup without bread.
No, that's the same.
100%. Once I'd finished cooking, I put some soup in a little plastic bowl for Elsie, along with half a slice of bread. "Come on, little one," my husband said, whilst lifting my daughter into her high chair. As I handed Elsie the soup, she had an inquisitive look on her face. She's only 3 years old, and if I'm honest, she doesn't say an awful lot. I ignored her and grabbed a bowl of soup for my husband. I took it over to him. He didn't say thank you. He was too busy watching the football to pay any attention to me. Side note, outrageous.
I know, it's absolutely classic.
I went over to the high chair to check on Elsie. She was not eating the soup. She was just swishing it around the bowl with her spoon. "Mummy," she whispered whilst looking into my eyes. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" I said to her, whilst placing my hand onto the edge of the high chair. "I have not had soup for a long time. I've not had soup since I was with Grandma Dorothy." Dorothy was my mother's name. I had never spoken about my mother to my daughter before. I always thought Elsie was too young to know about tragic family deaths. What do you mean, Elsie? Grandma Dorothy's not been with us for a long time," I explained to her. I was shaking. My blood ran cold. How did she know my mother's name? Suddenly it hit me. The soup on the worktop. There was an empty tin of soup on the worktop the day I found my mother's corpse, followed by 2 bowls. Me and Grandma Dorothy ate a bowl of vegetable soup, and then, Mummy, I killed her.
Oh my, what the,
Elsie was smirking and twirling her curly blonde ringlets between her fingers. I pushed this to the back of my mind. My daughter never knew my mother's name, nor did she know the situation regarding my mother's death. I thought perhaps she was making this up, or she'd overheard a conversation between me and her dad.
Yeah.
That evening, I was tucking Elsie up into bed. I had an urge to mention it again. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. I would not be able to sleep tonight if I didn't ask Elsie what was on her mind. I placed my hand on top of Elsie's blanket and I looked deeply into her eyes. "Who told you about Grandma Dorothy, Elsie?" "That was a very long time ago, long before you were born. You need to tell Mummy if somebody tells you something scary like this. I can always help you." Elsie looked confused. She tilted her head and dragged her fingers underneath her pillow. "Here, Mummy," she said, whilst handing me an old metal spoon. The spoon was rusty, but I could still make out the floral pattern on the handle. There are spoons that my mother had in her house. Where had she found this? "Where did you find this, Elsie? Who gave this to you?" I raised my voice at her. I was becoming angry at my daughter. So much rage was building up inside of me. "It still hasn't been washed, Mummy. If you smell it closely, it still smells like vegetable soup. And even if you look closely, you can see Grandma Dorothy's blood on the bottom of the handle." I took the spoon away from her, opened her bedroom window, and threw it out onto our front street. It's been there 3 weeks now. I've taken some space away from my family, and I've been staying in a local hotel. I need time to process what is going on. Is my child clinically insane? Or did she live in the past as a murderer?
This is a scary story about Do Not Open. There was an 18-year-old girl named Mia who was in her first year at college. She lived alone in an apartment near her university. One night when she was doing the dishes, she got a call from her friend Pete. She picked it up and he said, "I'm bored, I want to hang out." Mia said, "Yeah, me too, come over." Pete then said he'll be over in 15 to 20 minutes. She then hung up and decided to take a shower. Mia was in the middle of shampooing her hair when she suddenly heard a loud banging on the door. She stuck her head out of the shower and said, "Come in, it's open." But a few minutes later, the banging on the door started again. She then stuck her head out of the shower again and said, "Come in, it's not locked." Just then her phone started to ring and it was Peter. Mia said, "I'm in the shower, why don't you stop knocking and just come in?" Peter's voice sounded extremely scared and he said, "Do not open the door." Mia said, "Why not?" "I'm outside your apartment building," whispered Peter. "And I just saw a strange woman coming up the stairs to your apartment covered in blood and holding a knife. And she was smiling weirdly and didn't look human at all."